Keep in mind that NVIDIA, because of its size, makes up a significant portion of the S&P 500. So when NVIDIA moves, the S&P moves, generally speaking. We have the Fed meeting minutes to cover, and then all eyes were on NVIDIA earnings this week. So we'll wrap up with kind of a quick summary of what we saw in the earnings report there just yesterday on Wednesday. Steele, financial advisor with Mainsail Financial Group here in Bellevue. And our goal is to leave you feeling more empowered every week with some of these market updates and hopefully bring to you some of the most pressing news, data, trends that are really shaping the markets. This week, there is quite a bit on the housing side of things, so we'll cover that. Again, we do have the Fed meeting minutes that came out yesterday. And then the big story, of course, was NVIDIA earnings after the bell yesterday, so we'll cover what happened there as well. To start off, let's talk a little bit about the housing side of things. So on Tuesday, we had pending home sales come out. The pending home sales number came out up 1.4%. Today, we had both housing starts and building permits come out. Housing starts were at 1.47 million, building permits at 1.44 million. Both of these were slightly above expectations, but muted expectations maybe is a good way to think about it going into it. Nonetheless, both slightly above expectations though here today. And then we also had the Fed meeting minutes come out just yesterday on Wednesday. So this is really important, although keep in mind we are moving from the Powell Fed chair to Warsh, it looks like most likely. And so take this with a bit of a grain of salt. Now, this is a committee, and the Fed chair does not make these decisions in and of themselves, but nonetheless, they do have a lot of influence. And so it's important to keep an eye on this as maybe Warsh's influence may shape where we go from here. But as the last meeting under Fed Chair Powell, the minutes did come out. It reinforced a lot of what we heard in the press conference, but generally speaking, the biggest takeaways are that it looks very likely that the committee is looking at holding rates higher for longer, and there are more people open to rate hikes on that committee as well. Now, what I will share is that I'm very interested to hear where Warsh takes this, and maybe if there's a change in tune on how the Fed thinks about its tools moving forward, because for whatever reason, all that seems to be the focus is interest rates, and it affects us a lot as consumers. So, lower interest rates certainly can be helpful for our ability to buy homes or, with our credit cards or auto loans or whatever it might be. But in terms of inflation, there may be more impactful tools. So I think I'm very interested to see where this goes. Again, Warsh does not make the decisions himself, but if he is the Fed chair here moving forward, he will have a lot of influence, and it will be very interesting to see if the conversation shifts or if it really stays around interest rates and really interest rates only for the most part that it has been. So anyways, I think that's important to watch. Again, the meeting minutes from the last meeting under Powell would suggest holding rates for longer, and also a few more open to rate hikes. But again, I am very interested to see, assuming Warsh is the next Fed chair, how his influence maybe shapes that, and whether interest rates still remain the topic of conversation, or if we start to look at some other options as well. So we'll continue to keep you posted. We do have a bit of a break here until the next Fed meeting, but we will hear from them likely in the meantime as well. So we'll keep you posted as we hear more. Before I talk a little about NVIDIA's earnings, be sure to tune in next week. We do have a holiday week, so get ready. Markets are closed, of course, on Monday for Memorial Day. And honestly, it's a little bit quieter of a week next week in general on the data side as well. But keep in mind, markets will be closed on Monday. Before we break, I do want to talk a bit about NVIDIA's earnings. What I'll share is that I think this is really important to cover because after some of the recent news stories, I think this week all eyes were really on NVIDIA and what this really meant for the market moving forward. Keep in mind that NVIDIA, because of its size, makes up a significant portion of the S&P 500. So when NVIDIA moves, the S&P moves, generally speaking. And so I think this was really important to watch. We had some kind of muted markets going into this, and then on Wednesday after the bell, they had reported. What I'll share is that the reporting was really strong. Earnings, revenue, I mean, you name it. All the actual metrics that they reported were very, very strong. However, the market is not that impressed, I think it's fair to say. Keep in mind when these these significant growth companies are reporting earnings, even though the expectations are reported one way, the market typically is pricing in a beat on those expectations and typically pricing in significant growth for the foreseeable future. And so even when a company like NVIDIA reports really strong earnings and a significant amount of growth, quite frankly, the market has already priced that in, and maybe even more than what they delivered. So I just wanted to share that because the expectations do matter going into these earnings reports, but the market is also typically expecting a beat already. And if they don't beat by as much as expected, you can see the scenario we're seeing right now, where even though the report on the surface would look strong, the market is punishing NVIDIA a little bit. NVIDIA is down today for what it's worth. And therefore the S&P, the S&P is not down a lot, but certainly has brought that down a little bit as a result. So I just wanted to highlight kind of what's going on there. And this is exactly where, I think that some of the challenges could remain ahead for NVIDIA, for instance, is not that they're not a great company, not that they're not going to continue to report strong earnings. However, those earnings are factored into the market price to a degree already. Again, market's always looking forward. And so even if they do beat, they have a very, very high bar to beat on top of those expectations in order to continue to see, continued growth to any degree of what they've seen in the past. So that's where we stand. We will continue to watch NVIDIA because it is so heavy in the S&P that it moves a lot. But that was kind of the general takeaway, maybe more of a bland earnings report, quite frankly, from NVIDIA. And yeah, NVIDIA is down a little bit, not terribly, but more so just kind of middle of the road, I would say, more than anything else. So be sure to tune in next week. Again, we do have market holiday on Monday, but be sure to tune in next Thursday. We'll cover some of the happenings here for the week prior. In the meantime, have a great Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see you next Thursday at 3.